from Oxford, Ohio. Just outside the city of Cincinnati, you're listening to Don't Encourage This. I'm Mark Van Bullock. I'm a minister in the Presbyterian Church USA, and this podcast is a series of conversations with artists, creatives, interfaith voices, and nerds. My guest this episode is Stevi Incremona Dybas. Stevi is a multi-talented actress, rock singer, and performer who tours with the national act Remember Jones. She's been featured in Rolling Stone magazine performing live concept shows celebrating artists like Amy Winehouse, Maroon 5, Joe Cocker's Mad Dogs and Englishmen, and Meatloaf's Bat Outta Hell. Stevi has had a fascinating career that spans both music and theater. She's a graduate from NYU and a frequent collaborator with Broadway legend Kelly Rabke on shows like Tiny Giants and The Wizard and I. She was featured on Joe Contreras' album In Pieces, and I think a few other of his albums as well. Stevi also has an extensive voiceover career in audiobooks. She actually narrated the audiobook for my book, A Gray Man, on Audible, and she has countless other titles on the platform. And this is the first time we've gotten a chance to catch up since we collaborated on that project. It was such a delight. I just think Stevi has such a fun and interesting and fascinating career. I really enjoyed getting to talk to her about how she got into the rock and Broadway world, how she found this surprise career as a singer who creates musical demos for Broadway shows, how those demos have actually influenced some of Broadway's biggest stars. We also talk a little bit about her side gig narrating audiobooks and share some of our behind-the-scenes memories recording the Gray Man audiobook, of course. But she also talks about one of her musical idols, Amy Winehouse. Stevi, of course, performs in a touring tribute show to Amy Winehouse. And she talks a little bit about the struggle between maintaining a public persona as a performer, but also maintaining your personal authenticity as a human being. I had such a nice time getting to catch up with Stevi Incremona Dybas and welcoming her as my guest on this show. The bumper music for this episode is actually another acoustic cover of the old Cringe podcast theme song. This version was performed by Blue Garrett. Here it is. Let's talk to Stevi. This is the second podcast that I've done kind of like this.
Okay.
And one of the themes that pops up on these podcasts from time to time is this theme of authenticity and how do we encourage others and ourselves to be real. You posted a video on Instagram back on May the 8th of this year, and I wanted to ask if we could just play a little bit of it.
Sure.
Hi, this is weird. I don't usually do the talk to the camera thing, but I just figured instead of a wordy post, I'd just talk. So because I've had a few interesting conversations with people that I really trust and respect who are at varying levels of, I guess what you would call success in this industry. And that has led me to sort of think on perspective, what success means, how that changes, and also like the way the ego plays into the need of self-promotion right now, which the self-promotion as this industry stands is incredibly important. But I think if you're someone who has any level of humility or fragility in your ego, it's really hard to do that without feeling incredibly cringy because you're worried about being perceived either as like falsely humble and disingenuous or like arrogant and full of yourself, where the reality is that we're probably all existing in this place that's like in between because we're desperate to be at the level of success that we imagined when we were younger, while also feeling still really proud of what we've done, because with the way the industry is right now, it's not an accident if you're still working in it at all. So we should be able to celebrate each other's wins and our own wins without doing like the weird social media, like, just can't believe this is happening. Like, I believe it. And I also believed in more. And I also thought there was a chance that less would be happening. I don't know. That's where my head is at right now. I was in the city yesterday because I got to record something for Joey Contreras, which is always so fun and good for the soul. And I passed by a place that I used to get coffee before and after auditions, and it made me feel so weird. I had like a full panic to it, even though I haven't gone on an audition in a couple years. And I think that was my body fighting the expectations I had for myself at that period of my life versus where I'm at right now and not knowing how to feel about it. So then how do you translate that insecurity or that lack of understanding about your own emotions and funnel it into something for social media that fits into this 90-second reel video? I don't know. I'm not sure, but I'm going to try. This week was a great week for me. I got to record some music. I got to start working on a contract for a publisher that I can't believe I'm working with. And I am about to go out on a 4-show weekend with Remember Jones, bookended by the Amy Winehouse show, which was the first show I came in as a backup singer for Remember Jones in. And now Anthony trusts me with the title track of Back to Black. So I get to sing that in the show, and I'm surrounded by incredible singers and musicians. And I think if that 22-year-old could see this week, she'd be stoked. So I guess it's okay to just be excited about that and also stay motivated for what's next, because I'm game. I'm ready.
Well, it certainly wasn't 90 seconds, was it?
No, but I loved that. I saw that you posted that on Instagram like about a month ago, and when I watched it got me thinking. I love talking about this stuff because it's not. Like in some ways, this is a topic that I think our culture has normalized talking about a bit, but I don't know that we talk about it enough, or I don't know. It's such a weird balance because our media culture today glorifies authenticity, but on social media or just traditional media, authenticity is filtered through this lens of self-promotion and all this stuff. Could you share with us what maybe prompted you to start thinking about this?
Sure. I feel like I'm very much in the middle ground of the people that I surround myself with that are artists in terms of like various levels of success. I've been fortunate enough to work with people that I think have just like cornered their markets and they're crushing it. And they have these social media profiles that really act as promotion in a way that feels like closer to like celebrities, like sort of the traditional media where you see everything that they do. They have a fan base that interacts with it regularly. And then I'm also aware of people that I went to school with or that I know are incredibly talented, but I kind of end up feeling a little secondhand cringe when I watch their social media because there's like an air of desperation to it, at the risk of sounding like a little mean, because I don't think for a lot of people, the way that social media acts now matches with the core of who a lot of people are. For me, I am in a lot of projects that require connection with a larger fan base than the people that you know day to day, and that already would respond to a text to come out to a show, or, you know, are people that love you and are down to support you no matter what. But on a personal level, I don't love putting myself out there because the reason that I'm drawn to performance and artistry at all is to get outside of myself.
Right.
Like, I like to take on, you know, a different character, even when I'm myself on stage, even when I'm singing as me. I'm not a songwriter, so I like to sing other songwriters' music and tell other people's stories. That is cathartic to me. So then to have to put my face on social media and try to connect with someone that I might have met when I was on stage in like a different state, I have not figured out how to do it. And I was having conversations that week with people. It seemed like it was this perfect storm because it was a bunch of different projects and everyone was having the conversation of, how do we do this? How do we connect with people on social media? What do you lead with? And how do you get out of your own way? Like if you're having a lot of self-doubt about what you can offer and what you can put out into a super flooded platform.
Yeah.
It seems like, how could you bring anything new to this?
Right.
But you also have to. You can't stay silent because anytime you go to book something or you go to audition for something, the question is always, what's your social media profile, or what link can I follow you at, or how do we get the tickets and all that stuff? So I don't know. It had me in a tailspin that week. I just was hearing it from all different sides and agree with it.
I really liked what you said, and it got me thinking. I work in the church. I'm a minister in the Presbyterian Church USA, and your Instagram video reminded me of back when we were at the very beginning of the pandemic, and a lot of churches were having to learn very quickly how to live stream church services because there was no other way for people to connect with church. We were all quarantining at home. We have some members who are either older or they're immunocompromised or whatever it is. So we had to figure that out. And one of the things that I noticed very, very quickly is that, first of all, when you're either preaching or delivering something to a camera, it's different from doing it to real people. Your body has to change, your mannerisms change. And I noticed that a lot of my colleagues in ministry suddenly started posturing themselves differently, not in a bad way necessarily, but I remember talking to a colleague of mine saying, I really hope that we don't all suddenly start turning into broadcasters or wannabe influencers, because I feel like some of us, myself included, we're starting to drift in that direction, and that shouldn't be what church is.
Right.
Church should be where our real selves are present and here. I really hope this doesn't start a trend of that starting to drift away and us being, if you liked this morning's service, don't forget to like and subscribe. And I really don't, that was my nightmare. And I don't think that's happened writ large, but it just got me thinking about there is that tension when you're trying to connect with people in an online space, because you do have to present yourself. But if you present yourself too much, it becomes less real, less human.
Right. Well, and also I think it's a tendency when you're nervous, you just mimic what you've already seen to be successful.
Right.
So I think if it's happening subconsciously, you're like, oh, this is the way you connect with people, or this is what polished looks like. And then, you just end up parroting something. And yeah, it's definitely tricky.
Yeah. Or this is what gets more likes or subscriptions or whatever.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And then you kind of end up in a space where if you're putting something else on and it's not how you would talk to the people that you care about, or you're saying things that you wouldn't normally in your day-to-day life, then even if you do have success, you have a platform that doesn't match the person that you are if people were to see you and talk to you offline.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
Yeah. I remember I was in a church meeting. I won't say which church. It wasn't the church where I currently serve, but I work on a couple of committees and I work with other different churches locally.
Okay.
And I think this must have been at some point during the pandemic. They were trying to, like so many churches, they were saying, how can we bring in more young people? How can we just get more members in the door and da-da-da-da? And they started talking in this kind of social media speak, well, this gets more likes on da-da-da-da.
Oh.
And I said, well, there's no data anywhere that suggests that more likes on YouTube or likes on Facebook translates to more members of your church. There's just no evidence for that at all. Just be an authentic community that does good work in the neighborhood and cares for people genuinely. And that's probably the best you can do, but don't go chasing internet trends. I just don't think that's going to end well.
Yeah, well, because they change so fast too. It's you can't really keep up with it all the time. And I mean, in the music biz, we're talking about it all the time. The people that have these wild social media platforms, it doesn't necessarily contribute to ticket sales.
Yeah.
There's such a change since the pandemic in where people want to go. I think people like to be home more than ever before. They're also careful about how to spend money, which makes a lot of sense to me. I totally understand it. But streaming, music streams and views and content, that seems to exist in a bubble that doesn't necessarily match the people that want to come out and be in person. So it feels like if you can connect on more of a personal level with the people that are viewing your content, those are the things that contribute to the really cool conversations you have at the end of a show with someone that saw something online or heard about the show, and then they looked into it, they kind of liked your vibe and who you seem to be on a personal level, and then they come wait for you after the show and say hi, and you get to have that personal human connection.
Yeah.
That's the reason that I think most people do it. And it just gets lost and diluted, I think, on social media.
Yeah.
It's really hard to just, I don't know.
And what's kind of ironic is that personal connection after the show. That's really the impression that you leave them with, ultimately. I remember I talked to a friend of mine who'd gone to see, I can't remember what musical act this was, but they put on this amazing show, and, you know, the band was really tight, and it was just a great performance. The lighting was incredible. It sounded good. And he was telling me that he did this like a little meet and greet after the show with whoever it was. I don't remember. And I said, well, what was that like? And he was like, he was kind of a jerk, actually. It was kind of a bad night. And I thought about that. And I was like, it was kind of a bad night. You just told me that he put on this amazing show. The music was perfect. The vocals were like flawless. But because that personal connection just spoiled it, that's what he left with. And it just got me thinking, on the one hand, that's not exactly fair to all the technicians and performers that worked really hard.
Sure.
That one particular singer notwithstanding. But it also goes to show how much of an impact the personal relationship makes. At the end of the day, like, it can even arguably outweigh all that other stuff, maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
I definitely think it can. I think if you're doing whatever you're doing, you know, whether it's you, I think you would have the same impact if you gave this amazing sermon and then afterwards you didn't have the time to shake someone's hand at church.
Right.
There's just a disconnect afterwards. So, you know, I can only speak for performers because that's what I do. But I feel like if you do it for the right reasons, you're doing it for the connection with the people that are there for you, or because you have a story you're trying to tell through whatever you're singing or showing. So if that ends once the curtain closes, so to speak, then I think it's phony. And I think some of the things that have made me want to continue doing this, even, you know, in the pandemic or when money wasn't great or whatever, all that stuff, is the conversations and the moments I've had after the shows with people where they end up talking about something that it reminds them of and their experience. It's like an emotional connection for them. And then they say, like, you know, it was so nice to meet you and thank you and allowing me to like share that. There's this one show that I do with the production company I work with. It's an Amy Winehouse show. And Amy Winehouse came out with the Back to Black album and then passed really shortly after, tragically.
Yeah.
So that music is really visceral. The lyrics in it, the artistry, it's crazy. And a lot of people have connections to that album because it was the backdrop of a particular point in their life. And then they never got to see her do it live because she passed.
Oh, wow.
So that show has been monumental in terms of connection to audience members across the country. Everybody's different. Everyone took a different understanding from that music. It hits them like in the feels, and they want to talk to you about it because you're the person up on stage having studied it and trying to do justice to some of the most incredible music ever written. So then all of a sudden, it's just like the absolute equalizer. Like that kind of music, it's just everybody's in the same room celebrating it, whether they bought a ticket to support it or whether, you know, we're on stage sweating through the music trying to do it justice. Like everybody is in the same world there. And that is really cool. That feels so special.
Yeah, and it sounds like it hits people on a couple of different levels because on the one hand, like you said, music has a way of taking us back to our memories, our emotional memories from when we heard music for the first time. And that particular album for Amy Winehouse, for so many people, represents this visceral memory for them. But there's another level, it sounds like, where the show that you're doing, in some ways, is kind of like wish fulfillment for the fans. Like we'll never be able to experience what that show would have been if Amy were still alive and had been able to do it. But you're sort of helping them celebrate the music in person in a way that, I don't know. It's not the same, of course, as seeing Amy Winehouse perform her own music, but it does. I feel like there is like a kind of a wish fulfillment quality. Like this is the experience of us being together in a communal space, experiencing and celebrating the music in our own way.
Exactly. It is actually, so the company is Remember Jones, and the lead singer in Remember Jones, Anthony, called this Amy Winehouse show the Amy Winehouse Celebration because over the years, it's changed from just an album that the core band used to just sort of like play the songs. Now it's turned into, because of crowd, audience reception, it's turned into a celebration show. It's a big 12-piece band, a whole horn section. And we've done it for years now, but every time we go into that show, beforehand were like, honor this music, remember where it came from, remember Amy. We have audio clips that we include throughout the show of her speaking because she's got this like crazy Cockney voice and she says all these shocking things. We try to really just make sure that her essence is there through it without copying her.
Yeah.
Because Amy was all about authenticity and doing her own thing. So, I mean, it all is like a full circle conversation because all of the singers in the show, all of the instrumentalists that come out, we're not dressing up with the beehives and trying to be Amy Winehouse. We're trying to let the music that she wrote land on us in the way that it really naturally does, and then celebrating that through our performance with the people who didn't get to see it live or were one of the 10 people that saw, the tour that she did before she passed. And it hits very different than, say, the Meatloaf Bat Outta Hell show that we do. But that is a different kind of nostalgia.
Oh, I really want to see that show.
We're doing that in October in New Jersey. But yeah, that's different. That's everybody that like saw the tour and just it takes them right back to, that's my parents' generation. That's when they were like dating in high school. And so then they go see that show and it takes them right back there. It's different, but it's still connection.
Yeah.
It's still celebration.
Oh my God.
So
I have to tell you a really quick, this is going to be a complete tangent. I'm sorry, but I'm going to veer up.
I love a tangent.
Years ago, when I was a student at Emerson College, I worked for the campus TV station there, and we did this very short-lived talk show called Up Late. Meatloaf had just put out this concert DVD called Meatloaf Live with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra.
Wild.
And if you watch it, he's clearly drunk on stage. 5 minutes into the show, he's covered in sweat, and he's still got like another hour and a half to go. So it's just watching him running on fumes, but he's just like screaming and mumbling and giving it everything. And it's one of the most gloriously passionate, incoherent concerts I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And we used to do this thing on the show. If we did like a joke or a bit or something just didn't land or just got an awkward silence or the audience was just like, boo, we would just push a button and play a clip of Meatloaf flop sweating with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. And everyone's like, yay, we like that better.
That's amazing. I mean, he was a crazy entertainer. It's wild.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be learned from Meatloaf.
Indeed.
And also a lot to not learn.
Indeed. I love what you said about the Amy Winehouse thing, though, because it sounds like when you guys are doing that show, what you're trying to do is to capture like the spirit and maybe even like the attitude of what she represents, and not just trying to like recreate her vocals or recreate her, the way that she performs. You're performing it your own way, but you're trying to maintain the spirit of what she was about by bringing your own self into. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what makes this show, I mean, I'm obviously biased, but we actually were just featured in Rolling Stone magazine.
Whoa!
There was an Amy Winehouse biopic that just came out. There are a ton of acts that do Amy Winehouse music. There's one other act where the lead singer looks and sounds like her. And forgive me, I forget the name of them. But in this article, it was they were featured and we were featured because there's almost like a skit to it. It's really trying to be as close to on the nose in a beautiful way. Like she does an amazing job at being a tribute artist to Amy Winehouse's music. And then our show, we have 5 different singers throughout the show. It's a 12-piece band, and everybody is like a different character.
Oh, wow.
It's not like the same type of person. Everybody has a different background. A lot of us have theater in our roots, so we really go back to the lyric and we really like to deliver a story. But it was never the direction to try to be Amy, because I think that goes back to, at the beginning I was talking about there's like a level of cringe that can happen sometimes.
Yeah, sure.
And I think it's really hard when someone is a once-in-a-lifetime artist like Amy Winehouse. I think if you try to embody that and try to be her, a lot of the time it causes a disconnect because it's really hard to live up to that. But if you can love and appreciate and just want to honor the work of someone like that, in like with your own life story and what you bring to the table as your own kind of artist and musician, and you're just honest about the fact that you're just like inspired by that other artist, we're having a good time with it. It seems to be going well.
I went to see The Producers on Broadway years and years and years ago.
Oh, yeah?
This was back when it was still on Broadway. And Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick had been in the show for, I don't know, maybe a year or so. And it was this really, really hot ticket back when it was on. This must have been like 20 years ago or so. The producers, by the way, for those who don't know, is the Mel Brooks movie that was made into a Broadway musical. But anyway, when I went to see it, Nathan Lane was, I think he'd left the show, and there was like an understudy that was playing his character, Max Bialystock, that night. And the guy who was playing that role, the understudy, was clearly just doing his very best Nathan Lane impersonation throughout the entire show. And the whole time I was just like, ugh, dude, like what do you do? Like, first of all, you're not Nathan Lane. And secondly, this isn't really good. Like, it's taking me out of the story. It's taking me out of the character. Like, just play the character the way that you would play the character, and just, be yourself. Well, don't be yourself, but be the character. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That would ironically be a much funnier, more enjoyable experience for an audience.
Yeah.
Because they're not sitting there cringing at you trying to pretend to be something you're not.
I think that sounds like a case example of, insecurities getting in the way. You're like, I was cast as the understudy to this person to be second to this person. So if he got the role, he's this big guy, he's this huge personality, and that's what people are paying an exorbitant amount of money to see. So let me do my best Nathan Lane. But you're right. I mean, a lot of the times then you're just like, what was the point of that? Like, what did I get from that? Because it just felt like a secondhand performance because it wasn't him. He wasn't bringing himself to the role at all.
Yeah.
I guess. I wasn't there.
Well, speaking of performing, so how did you get into performing? How did you know that you were musical?
I don't ever remember not singing. So there's videos of me when I was a little kid. I was singing pretty much as soon as I could talk. And my dad is a singer, just hobby. And so he always used to sing us to bed at night. He would bring the guitar in and whenever. He was a doctor. So whenever he wasn't working the overnight shifts, he would take that time to do that. And I think that must have landed on me because I just was always singing. And I always knew I wanted to sing in some capacity.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Fairhaven, New Jersey, just a little square mile town. It's by Red Bank, New Jersey. I feel like people know that town more. I was always singing growing up, and then I kind of got into theater in high school, but I never was the kid who was always listening to musicals. I liked going to see them, but I was never listening to them. I was wanting to be a pop star kind of, or maybe that way. Until I did, when I was 16, I did Jesus Christ Superstar.
I love that show so much.
Oh, yeah. And it totally changed. I didn't know at that point in time, just how much it would affect my life. But the music director for that show is actually now Remember Jones, who I work with and for. But at that point in time, he was just, in his 20s, he was this music director, and he brought in these amazing crossover, singer-songwriters, fierce vocalists, and blended that to theater. So it was this in-between space where rock and roll met theater, and it sent me on a whole trajectory. So I ended up going to school for music theater.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I went to NYU, which feels like another lifetime. And then I have found my way back over the years, just really more into, singing has always been my first love.
Yeah.
So I did some theater, did some workshops, still love it always, but I was trying to put on the hat of a more traditional music theater performer for a long time. And then when I took a breath and was like, I should actually just go towards projects that I gravitate to that make more sense to me. Now I'm working as a singer, I don't know, feels meant to be in that way. I ended up finding my way back to Anthony as he was starting his production company, and then now we're here. And so that's been a very important relationship to me in terms of artistry. But yeah, I've been performing always. So
is that how you transitioned into doing the live shows that you do now? Is it through the relationship with Anthony? Was he I'm so curious, how do you, because it must be a very competitive field. How did you find yourself being able to do this? Because so many people can't. Yeah.
After that production of Jesus Christ Superstar, I went to, I auditioned and went to theater school. And then after that, I was doing the New York thing of auditioning all the time. So I was lucky enough to do some off-Broadway work, some off-Broadway weird work, a bunch of workshops. And then I was lucky to meet a bunch of composers. I learned after a few years of trying to fit myself into music theater roles that already existed, which makes me think of the way you were talking about the understudy with Nathan Lane. Like, I was like, how do you fit into a box, like fit into something that's already coined? The music theater is like a very, especially as it's become really expensive and commercial, a lot of the times these roles are sort of like small, you got to fit yourself into, just in terms of being like a carbon copy of the last person that did that role, which was always really hard for me. And so I ended up starting to take classes where I was able to meet music theater composers. And through that, they were like, yeah, you're an actor, but you're more of a musician. Are you doing any music work? And I was like, no, because I'm not a songwriter. So there felt like there was this dissonance there. And then I started to realize where I fit best in this crossover music theater community storyteller performance thing is doing justice to someone else's words and bringing my ability to sing. I'd sing more like a musician than like I don't know what to say, but I'm like I'm a musician in that way. Like my voice is my instrument, and I found this space in between where I could work with the people that were writing the songs for performers.
Yeah.
And I could be the original voice on a lot of demo work with new Broadway composers and stuff like that. That felt really important to me.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah, that was like sort of my like little in-between spot. There's been a few songs that have come out with names that are, you know, much bigger than I will ever be in the Broadway community. And they've been released. And I can hear like the vocal choices that I made when the song was being written being used by the person whose the song is being released with.
That's so
because
cool.
they learned it from my demo.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I think it's so cool. Some of my friends are like, aren't you so annoyed that it's not you? It's not your glory? I'm like, it is. I couldn't be more flattered that someone that's in, you know, a very different, successful, I'm putting that in quotes, but whatever, you know, like a more known name is respecting my choices enough to be like influenced by them. That to me couldn't be cooler. That's so flattering. And that makes me feel like competitive in what I do in a good way. While I was in the middle of doing that, Anthony, Remember Jones, was casting for a production, a concert version of Hair, the musical.
Wow.
So it was partially staged with like a 20-piece rock band featuring Konstantin Maroulis and this whole thing. So I wrote him this little message on Facebook and I was like, hi, Anthony, I don't know if you remember me. I'm going to audition for Hair. You know, I just wanted to say hi. And I remember I felt so cringy about it. I was like, he's not even going to know who I am. He's not going to remember me at all. But I should just send this message. And he wrote back and he was like, you don't have to audition.
Oh, you must have made a really good impression on him, apparently.
I guess so. It's the whole imposter syndrome that I've always had because I would have put money on the fact that he like wouldn't even really remember who I was. Once I was in the ensemble for that show and there were other people that were featured in it and that it wasn't me, but I worked hard and I show up and I'm professional and I treated it like it was Broadway and that stood out. So after that, he was like, I want you in my core band. And then I was in the core band for a little while. I was one of a few singers. And then now it's just me and him fronting the original music for that production company / band. And I've been able to be in almost every single one of the feature productions that he does. And it's something I never take for granted. It challenges me wildly, but it definitely satisfies the crossover theater music thing where I was like, where do I fit? And it very much feels like this is where, that's where.
That's so cool. And also, like, when you get to do like demos and things like that for Broadway shows or those kinds of projects, you're part of history. You're part of the creative process that's creating the thing, because Broadway shows are, I mean, any sort of theater really, when the thing is being made, it is such a fluid process and there's so many collaborators and things change all the time. And if you were to buy a ticket to go see that show on Broadway, you can say like, I was part of creating that.
Yes.
I was part of the process of birthing that into like, that's so amazing. Like so few people are able to say that.
Yeah. You know what? It's one of those things that as time goes on, I appreciate it more and more because I think I was so attached to being the name on Broadway for the longest time, just because that's what I went to school for and that's what everyone said success was.
That's like every theater kid's fantasy.
Yeah, no, and it's also like the most lucrative financially, and
of course,
then there's it's the pinnacle thing, which totally makes sense. I have so much respect for people that are on Broadway, my friends that are doing it. But I got to do a bunch of workshops where these were new musicals that were being written and being, the music was being changed every day and the book was being changed every day. And I got to be in the room with the composers and the book writers, and I got to be the guinea pig that they were working on. And I got to say, like, yes, that does work, or no, that's really hard to sing, or this, that, and the other thing. And I remember I did this show it's called Here Art Center in New York, it does a lot of like off-Broadway stuff. And we did this retelling it was a musical based on Antigone, and I got to be Antigone in it.
Oh, it's a great show.
Oh, yeah. No, it's some of the coolest music I've ever gotten to sing. I think it's like in pause right now, but I remember someone came to see the show and said to a friend of a friend, and it got back to me, the show is really great, but if this gets picked up, the first person that's going to be replaced for a bigger name is Stevi. The lead can't be Stevi. And I remember I was supposed to be scandalized by that comment, and I was like, not at all. I'm like, I know that. But if I built this, that feels really good to the artist in me.
Yeah.
That feels like I helped be a part of this creative process because I'm not a songwriter myself. So all of those things over time, I may not be the picture of what you imagine a New York City performer is, because I'm not on Broadway, because I'm not a household name, like all this stuff. But all these little pieces, they speak to the like little theater kid in me, or like the singer in me, all that stuff. Being respected for that just makes my heart feel really full. And then I just find other ways to make money.
Well, I think that's all really well and good, and I think that's a wonderful perspective. And I also think that to the person who said out loud, if someone has to be replaced, the first person's going to be Stevi, the next time you have a thought like that, just keep it to yourself. You don't need to say it out loud.
Yeah.
That doesn't need to be shared. Or maybe just, go home and say it when no one's around. I find that rude.
Well, it's... to be, if we're being completely honest, she was someone that was a child star on Broadway and then had not been able to like book her own work as an adult. So I know it wasn't coming from a place of confidence or high self-worth. It was.
I understand.
She was struggling, but
yeah, that's that's a very, very kind. I'm being less than saintly right now, but that's a very kind way to frame that. You do keep that actor side of you alive because you're also an audiobook narrator.
Yeah.
You and I actually worked together a couple years ago. You narrated the audiobook for my book, Gray Man.
Yes.
How did you get into audiobooks? How did you find that as a thing to do? I lost the rest of that sentence.
Yes. Audiobooks have been quite possibly the greatest gift. It's just been the best surprise. I am a storyteller. I've always been an actor, but I just am more competitive, I think, as a singer. So that's what I was doing professionally more. But when I was touring, at a certain point, you just can't listen to music anymore. Like your ears just need a break.
Totally.
So 2019, I was on the road for like 6 months. So that's a lot of time in, a van. And I was listening to audiobooks the whole time. And I'm like, why am I not doing this? Or how do people get into this?
Yeah.
It's not traditional commercial voiceover. I'm like, what is this world? And, it's just this weird thing where throughout the course of my life, people have been like, you know what, I like your speaking voice, or like, I wish you could tell me like a bedtime story, or like, which is such a funny, weird thing to be said to you like multiple times. I was like, maybe I should try this. And I had it on my radar that I wanted to, but I wasn't sure how to. And then when live performance shut down in 2020, I already had a microphone and I had some baseline knowledge of how to record myself just from recording some vocal demos.
Yeah.
So I went on this platform, which is called ACX, and it's Audible and Amazon's creative exchange with independent authors. And they can post their books on there, and you can submit an audition for it, and you don't need to prove that you have any experience, which it gets hairy. I think I was lucky enough that my training was able to, my training just in in voice and in acting from NYU and whatever gave me a leg up from people that didn't have any actual acting expertise. So I was able to audition for stuff, and I earned some projects pretty early on. And then it started to be like I kept saying to my now husband, I was like, this just feels like a fluke. Over time, I was able to build up a portfolio because my relationships with authors were really important to me. And I think I'm also a business person and fairly good human. So to be able to be reliable in sort of a creative industry where there's not a middleman, you know, at the beginning, you're just talking directly to the person whose product you're trying to do justice to.
Yeah.
I think I was able to wrap my head around that. Now I'm working almost exclusively with publishers because at a certain point I was like, I should actually invest in this.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, you know, you are one of those people that took a chance on me, and when I was like still really new. And so there's a title out there with yours and my name on it. And all of that has helped build me a resume that was able to allow me to prove myself to, you know, publishers that are now, they got me this nice booth.
Oh,
it's cool.
I'm honored to have been a very, very small part of it, but you would have gotten there anyway. I mean, you're so talented. And because we did work together on Gray Man, and I wanted to tell you sort of my perspective of working with you on that. I think one of the reasons why you're so good at audiobooks is because you have range as an actor. You can play a variety of different characters. When that was being developed as an audiobook, I probably listened to like 2 or 3 dozen different audiobook narrator like demo reels.
Sure, yeah.
I knew that I wanted a woman's voice to do the story, and I was sort of leaning in the direction of maybe trying to get like an older woman's voice, almost like a grandmother telling the story to not to children, because it's about like 20-something. Anyway.
Sure, yeah.
I was sort of leaning, I was like, I think it's going to be somebody like in their 60s or maybe even early 70s. I think I'm leaning for someone older to read this. And then I don't even remember how I stumbled on your tape, but the moment I heard your tape, I was like, this is it. If she would like to do it, if she'd be open to it, it's got it. Because she can do the spooky stuff. She can play like the younger characters, because the characters in the book are these like young 20-somethings.
Yeah.
Like she's going to be able to do like their angst and all that stuff with authenticity, but she can do justice to some of the older characters in the story. And it avoids the pratfall that I was really trying to avoid, which is hearing like a man try to impersonate like a young girl in the book. I thought was just going to be so cringy.
Sure.
I loved working with you on that. It was such an amazing experience for me. And
thank you, Mark. You're making me blush. Likewise though, because at that point, I don't remember when that was. Was it 2021 maybe? It
was probably, let me think now. It would have been, the book came out in May of 22.
Okay.
And we probably did the audiobook, a couple months before that? I think?
Yeah. It feels funny, like the last couple of years have just gone like that. But I remember just being, it really makes my job so enjoyable and easy when the writing is good, because then you can just lean into it. Like if your story already had such a cadence to it, the characters and their voicing had an indication that I didn't have to like pull from thin air. I just had to support the words that were there. And so, you know, and that in that way, it's just such a joy.
Thank you. That's very nice. And I wanted to tell you, I learned a lot about audiobooks just from working with you, because I didn't know anything about how those are made and produced. I went into that project so naive. I was like, well, you just hit record and read the book, and if you make a little mistake, you just clean it up. I mean, I didn't know anything, and you taught me the art form is so precise. The production has to be like exactly right, or else these platforms like Audible and ACX, they won't accept it. Right. And I remember you had sent me the first cut of the audiobook for Gray Man, and I was sitting in my living room. I'd poured myself a glass of wine, and I was listening to you reading the book, and I was just like thoroughly enjoying it. I'm just like jotting down little notes here and there, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. I'm listening to my book, and Stevie's wonderful. And I remember I sent you an email saying, hey, I really love this. And I said, I wonder if this gap between the chapters, can we like pull that in a little bit? And you wrote me back and you said, no, it has to be that way, because that's part of how Audible, they just need it to. And I didn't know anything about any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And it just really drove home to me that if I had tried to do that on my own, it would have never happened. I would have just been lost in this endless set of rules. But you had like the workflow down instantly. I feel like it was done in like a couple of weeks or something.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting to learn that side of it when I was like, okay, I want to be an audiobook narrator. to do it freelance, you also have to be the producer. So that was definitely, it was the first time in a little while that I had learned a new skill. So I was like, I've got storytelling. I know how to sing now. I can learn music. I can do all this stuff. But I was like, post-production, I have no idea what I'm doing here.
Right.
And so it was cool to learn. It's interesting because I've like come full circle and now I really don't have to do any of my own production. I send it to, the publishers usually have their own producers that do it, and they're even more specific than ACX demands, obviously, because quality, schwality, whatever. It gave me a huge appreciation for the vets that are doing it and how much goes into it. And I did end up having to have a lot of conversations with authors who were just under the impression that, I was just sitting there with the book in front of me doing the thing in one take and never made any mistakes, and that your voice sounds the same every day. I mean, if you think about it, for a 10-hour book, you can't be sitting there. You're not just sitting there for 10 hours reading. Like, your voice is a living, breathing thing that fatigues, and it changes with allergies, and it changes if you're at different points in the day. And so it's definitely, there's a lot more that goes into it than I think people realize. But if it's done correctly, it sounds as though someone's just sitting there telling you a story. So it's interesting in that way.
Yeah, well, you made it look easy, and I knew that it wasn't, but that's a testament to how hard you work and your professionalism and your commitment to getting it right technically.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that for sure.
I wanted to ask you before we wrap up, if there are any shows that you have coming up, or how can our listeners, if they want to like and subscribe you on Instagram or wherever, how can folks find you or connect with you or learn more about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, Instagram is usually the place I go to first. So it's just at Stevi, Stevi Incremona, Incremona. And on there, I always have links to the various different things I'm doing, whether it's the books or whether it's the shows. I'm actually heading out tomorrow for the next couple weeks. I have shows on and off throughout the week with Remember Jones. Some of them are original sort of like summer festival vibe shows. That's a mix of like original music and covers. And then we also have our Amy Winehouse summer run. So I think we're doing, over the next couple of weeks, we have like 6 shows. That has its own Instagram page. It's the Amy Winehouse Celebration. But you can find all that from my page or my website, which is myname.com.
That's awesome. Stevie, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to chat with me. I've thoroughly enjoyed working with you in the past and just seeing all your adventures. It's just so cool. I just think you have such an interesting life and an interesting career, and it's such a pleasure to get to talk to you. That's it, friends. That's the show. I want to thank my dear friend Stevi Incremona Dybas for joining me on this episode of Don't Encourage This. If you'd like to find out more about her fascinating career, you can find her at steviincremona.com. That's SteviIncremona.com. And if you'd like to hear more conversations like this one, if you'd like to encourage this, although you shouldn't, you can check out this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, wherever you like to get podcasts out of your electronic doodad, which you're obviously doing now. And of course, you can listen to an exciting audio-only version of the show on YouTube. Until next time, I'm Mark Von Bullock. Thanks, y'all. I'm out.